Hey, and welcome to the podcast. If you're curious about how consulting teams work with clients, or if you're thinking about getting into the space yourself, this episode will give you a lot of insight. I'm talking with Tom Schamberger from the German consultancy MSG. He is leading the cloud data platform team, and we got into a lot of really interesting stuff. Tom's background is pretty unique. He started coding Java when he was just 12 years old, went on to study computer science and data science, co-founded 2 startups, and now helps big companies figure out how to build scalable and efficient platforms. We spoke a lot about what it actually takes to be successful in data engineering consulting. And spoiler, it's not just about knowing the tools. Let's get into it. Hey Tom, how's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Fine, thanks. Thanks for being here.
A pleasure to be here.
You come from a consulting company, MSG.
Yes.
And as head of cloud data platforms, I guess you're working a lot with data engineering topics and also with data engineers.
Exactly. We are doing a lot of projects. So we are more from the architecture side. Maybe some words to myself. So maybe I would just introduce myself and give you a bit of insights how I came to be like a data engineer later than leading the cloud data platform team. So basically, I learned Java when I was 12 years old. And then my first coding projects I did with 14. So started very early in my school, and with others, I did a lot of also larger projects. And then, of course, it was clear that I would study informatics, and then I went to TU Munich, and there I studied computer science and later mathematics and data science. And during my study, I worked also for United Internet and built there my first big data streaming platform. It was very exciting because back then it was like I think more than 10 years ago. There we did everything on premise and with Kafka and Flink and things like that. And those technologies really inspired me through my whole career. And when I was basically finished with the project, I then went on together with a good friend of mine, and we co-founded together 2 startups in legal software, where we built software for law firms. So something completely different, but still in AWS cloud. On the cloud, we did also a lot of things with AI and stuff. So it was very exciting, but still before like all the Gen AI hype. And we could make money out of it. So we were profitable because we didn't need any investment. We could code ourselves. But then it didn't grow as much because lawyers don't like to go to the public cloud. They want to stay like on their own laptops and stuff. And we didn't want to do this. And I then switched to consulting. First to Reply. There I learned really all the data platform business, like modern data platforms on Databricks, on AWS and stuff. And then I changed to MSG, where Norman Hofer, my manager, he wanted to build a data business unit at MSG, which does the whole cycle from like data strategy over platform analytics to data science. So we built up completely from scratch the whole data unit. And so we have own departments for like data strategy and currently I'm leading the cloud data platform department there. We are currently 15 data platform architects and engineers, mainly coming from the architecture side of things. And we focus on many different technologies. So very technology-focused team. MSG is very like industry specific. So we worked a lot together with other teams that are more specific to insurance or banking or automotive and so on. But we like try to really get in the new technologies and think about how to use them effectively in our projects. Basically how I got there.
Nice. And so in this whole setup, the thing is with engineering or with data engineers is that you're consulting the companies to build minimum viable products, or is this already where they have something set up and you're coming in and you're basically helping them make this better?
Yeah, this is completely different from customer to customer. So basically what we try to do and what we can do best is basically a customer comes to us with a problem. So they come to us and say, we do all the data management via Excel sheets, and we came to a point where it's not manageable. How can you help us? And there we tell them, hey, here are those new technologies. We look into the problem. We have a lot of pre-sales often, where we just come together with them and we don't bill them even, and have some like first impressions on what they really need. And then sometimes we then continue with a workshop where we really try to find out what are they looking for? Are they looking for just to some data warehouse, or do they really need a sophisticated data platform? What technology-wise, what makes sense? Is it already a good idea to move into the cloud, which is as the department is called, of course, our go-to. But of course, we have other teams that can also, for some clients, they are fine with their little like database where they do stuff like maybe DuckDB or something like that. But of course, most of our customers are really big enterprises that are really looking forward to scalable solutions, and where we really help them with how to adopt Databricks, Snowflake, and so on. And there, of course, we partner with technology side, but we also try to be really tool agnostic. So we don't have consultants that only focus on Databricks, and when you invite them, they can only tell you about the Databricks and how to do things here. So because we focus more on the methodology, how to use the tools effectively, instead of focusing on the technology itself. And I think currently, when I see also a lot of, when I speak with a lot of architects and we see a lot of discussions, we always see all those diagrams of like different tools, and you always see company names and like arrows between them. And I think this is not the way to go, because I try to start usually with like boxes without any technology in it, and just trying to get the process, the methodology, what does need to happen. And I don't really get into in which environment does it need to happen, with what, on which tool stack does it need to happen. This is something that, of course, is also important, and we need to get into it. But there's too much discussion, I feel, about which technology, and too few discussions about how to actually leverage it to a point that it's really effective. And this is, I think, something that we really try. So being tool agnostic, but knowing which tool to use in different environments, but also really knowing how to implement it and what methodologies to use, how to structure things and things like that.
It's very interesting because for me, 3 hours earlier, we recorded a podcast, or we did a live stream. That's the right thing. We do every Thursday a live stream with my coaching buddies where we're coaching data engineers. And we were talking about the tools that people need. And very often it is that people think tools only in the tools section where, Snowflake, Databricks, and so on. But the biggest tool is actually understanding how can I create the solution without focusing too much on the individual tools. So understanding that's the data, that these are the goals, this is what we need to build. And that's actually and I hear this from you as well, that this is a big part of what the engineer or the solution architect does, right? Not the coding, but the actual work before.
Exactly, and this is what we are trying to do. As you might imagine, of course, we are a German team also. So that means, of course, for us to work as effective as possible, we try not to just sit down and write some code, because usually also with no large language models, like with a lot of code assistants, but also, of course, there are other regions where they can build code really much more affordable. But where we really come into play is really when we need to introduce processes, introduce platforms, infrastructure, and things like that to really make things really effective. But the implementation work in the end, like the really coding of all the SQL statements and things like that, this is something we also do, and we also do regularly, because you always need to also know how to implement it in the end. But this is something, of course, where we don't work as effective. So where we really try to help a lot is like with the larger decisions and to support and how an effective workflow can be established, how a platform team can look like, and things like that. So what's the process for better data governance, data quality, and things like that. So those are really more the topics I see. Yeah, so where we really are effective, because we are a very senior team. So we don't have any experts that are like only very, very new to the topic, only a few years of experience, but we are really experienced team. who have seen a lot of different technology stacks and things like that. And this is currently really where we can really help most effectively.
So will you say this is for somebody who wants to get into data engineering, or who is searching for a job, especially in consulting, that, yes, it is, or let me phrase it this other way. If somebody is looking for a job in consulting, like, what do they need to focus on? Is it the tools? Is it the overall process, the overall thinking? Is it both? What are you looking for when you hire someone for these jobs?
So for us, of course, it comes basically down to, I would say, 3 different things. The first thing is like the technical knowledge, and there, of course, it's very important. The most important thing is the basics. So solid Python skills, like solid SQL skills, like solid understanding how a database works, what's the difference between a view and a table, what's a left join, things like that, like really solid knowledge and how it works, like under the hood, because those things are really hard to learn afterwards, because they're really the basics. So what's the difference between a transactional database and an analytical database, for example? Those things, like really the basics, like really from the tool side, so from the Python, SQL coding and things like that, and also from maybe even PySpark. That's always a good standard to just know how big computation works. And then on the other side, like really technology, also a bit more theoretical, because of course, theory is also important. How does a database work? As I said, what's a data lake? What's the difference between a transactional versus analytical database? Those things. So more of like the technical foundation, so the more conceptual foundations. And then, of course, there then are expert topics where you can go very deep. But of course, for somebody starting, this is something we can build up over a career. Maybe you start with the consulting and your first project is Azure Synapse. So then you will get some very deep understanding of like how Synapse works. And as a next project, you then go towards more of a data lake, Azure Data Lake. And there you do a lot of transformations with Spark, let's say. So then you get a more understanding in that. So you have a very good foundation, and then you go deep in different projects, in different topics, and you build up your more expert topics over the time. And this is then really the technical, this is more of the technical side of things. So really good technical skills, as I said, good foundations, and then some interesting, deep understanding, maybe some projects done already or something like that. But of course, for a junior, for example, this doesn't have to be there. So the second pillar is really then consulting skills. But this, of course, when you haven't been to consulting, this is something you need to build up. But they are definitely skills you can already work on. This is like how you can present yourself, and how you can do presentations, how you can interact with people you don't know, a lot of soft skills actually. But those are also really important, because in the end, we are not robots, and also we don't interact like in a very in a robotic environment. We are really interacting with people, and people are really different. And a lot of people that come into consulting, for some they really can do it out of the box, but a lot of people really struggle because they can't really work with different kinds of people. For example, there are sometimes let's say a bit older, grumpy people also you work with, right? That are not really friendly. That happens from time to time. But if you have a project with them, you can't, and you don't know who you are going to work with. If you have a job at a firm, you get to know the team maybe usually before you get hired, and usually you get along at some point. But with customers, you will meet a lot of people, and you will need to work with a lot of people. And some of the people are very difficult. As I said, sometimes older, grumpy people, or sometimes people that are not really friendly. Sometimes also people that just might not work as well with you. For example, they don't communicate in a useful way, or they are really, so they do a lot of things themselves and don't like to work with others, and so on. And you have to cope with that. And you need to have soft skills.
It's also what I have learned through my years in, let's say, a large company is that when you work with people, it's not always like they're grumpy, but it's not because of them, but because they need to take part in that project. They've been told, you have to do this, we have to do this, we're going to make that switch, doesn't matter what you think. And then they go into that project with that negative mindset, right? And that is sometimes really difficult.
Yes, definitely. And most of our customers, we are really lucky. We have a lot of very good customers that are really friendly and really easy to work with, and so on. But at some point, there's you will work with people, and it's not dependent. Like it might be also dependent to you. You might be able to work with some kinds of people in a better way than with other people. We are just people. Everybody has their strengths and weaknesses, and sometimes it's easier to work. Sometimes people are under stress, but this is really something which is really important. And also, this is something where there are really people that are really technically brilliant. Like they are really good engineers, but they will never be able to work in a consultancy because they are just from their personality, they just have a hard time to interact with new people and things like that. And this is something you can work on. So some people, they feel it very natural. Some people have a bit of problem with that, but this is something you really can work on to just find a better way to interact. But this is something really where sometimes we also run into problems where nobody is to blame. It's just sometimes misunderstandings and things like that. And that you need to cope with those situations.
For me as an educator, what can people do to show these kind of soft skills and show that they understand more than just the individual tool? What are you looking for?
So basically, what I'm looking for, of course, to build up the soft skills. Of course, it's very nice if you are attending a lot of workshops, working a lot with different people already. Like you go to some meetups, maybe you talk there to people. You try to really have some projects with others. Maybe also in your company you're already working with. Maybe you start some little side hustle or working with others. This is some mindset that a lot of also startup founders have, like really wanting to work together with other people. Maybe you can present something or something like that. So really trying to interact, or just joining some club or so not just working the whole day at your laptop at home and never going out and things like that. This is something which hurts your soft skills. And when you start interacting a lot and being a bit more active, joining, I can really recommend you, if you want to go into consultancy, and just join your local meetups. Yeah, join your local meetups and maybe try to take an active part in it. You don't need to present something yourself, but maybe talk to people and things like that. This will really, you will have good connections. Maybe you will meet a lot of people already in consulting, and you also learn how to interact with a lot of different people. And this is, I think, something which is really valuable.
Yeah, so that during an interview process also they are prepared with interaction. They don't just sit at home and do coding all the day.
This is really what we especially are looking for. Of course, not all consultancies, like a lot of consultancies, they really see you as more or less as a resource they just use. So there are consultancies, bigger consultancies that have very large teams, and you're going to be assigned some exercise. You don't talk a lot with the customer. You just assign tasks and you code it. right? This kind of consulting is also something which for some firms, like how some firms work, there are very large projects. For example, also in automotive, where you work like in teams of a lot of hundreds of people, and of course there you might not need those soft skills. But what most people really enjoy, and a lot of people really enjoy to work also at MSG, because we interact a lot with the customer. We really try to solve projects. You don't just are in some big team and need to solve one task and every day, and you don't really speak a lot with and do the conceptual work. Yeah, this is. But for us, it's really this skill is really important. Might not be for every consultancy.
Of course, maybe it's because then they have these teams that are more customer faced, and then there are these teams that are more in the background and just
exactly
coding. Okay, but in this case, it's still quite difficult for somebody to show this, right? They can go, as I said, they can go to meetups and they can do presentations there and so on, but they need to write about it. They need to present it somewhere, right? Because you need to show this to potential employers.
Yes, of course, but I would say that we are also presenting at a lot of meetups and at a lot of events. At least we are there mostly. So also at for example Hannover Messe and so on. So this is always a great place to also get in touch and just talk to us. I would say, of course, like soft skills, it's important, but something which is important to build it up. But I would say that everybody gets immediately if you have them or not. So I really say people like within 5 minutes, they can tell, oh, this is somebody who could like really work with the customer or not. So this is really something which becomes part of yourself, and which then really, I'm really sure if you work on it, you have an interview, or you have or somebody who works at a firm like that, and you get in touch, they will they will know immediately, and you will have good chances that you get an interview and get the chance. Yeah, but of course also technical skills are very important. Yeah, and I think in the end it's really both. And of course for like more of the senior positions and so on, it's not just because consultancies, they're not just selling people, but they're really building up knowledge inside of them. So we are working close with a lot of technology firms. We are investigating things. We are doing a lot of demos. When there's a new feature or new tool or something like that, we try it. We speak to the vendor. We have our own demo environments and things like that. And of course, we also try to pass this information down to people who are not experienced. Because in the end, we wanna give our customers the best source of information, and this means that as a third pillar, especially if you want to have a bit more of a senior position, you also need to be able to pass your information down to work with juniors, also from a management perspective, help them in projects and try to bring them through like a lot of traps there, right? This is also something. So if you enjoy working and sharing your knowledge and like helping others, this is also a very important skill we are looking for. But of course, I mean, and so this is basically the third pillar. So I would say this is really like the three things that are important, like good technical skills, good consulting skills, and so soft skills, and also being able to share what you've learned, your experience with others, and also that you like to work that way. Because we don't want to have silos. We don't want to have this one expert who knows everything and everybody has to go to him because nobody else knows it. In the end, we of course want that he shares it and builds up people. And this is the way like everybody can learn from each other. And this is something we are really looking for.
Makes sense. What are, in terms of tools or in terms of platforms, what do you see? Are there some here for Europe, but generally, are there some coming up or being used most?
Yes, of course. Of course, there are, I would say, two very recent developments. So first one is all the, let's start with the easier one, Microsoft Fabric, because Microsoft Fabric, I mean, with Microsoft, it's everybody who has a Power BI license, enterprise license, will move to Fabric, and they all, of course, and a lot of customers, they think about what can they do with it. Of course, there are so many things there which get developed, and Microsoft offers there a good overall feature set. Of course, it's very new. It has a lot of, also still a lot of issues, but it's definitely something a lot of firms are adopting at the moment. And it's a very interesting technology. And yeah, we have a lot of demand there. Microsoft Fabric, and especially all the concepts behind it, because it has many different, it has more of a classical data warehousing, lakehouse approaches, and also real-time dashboards and real-time intelligence. So it combines a lot of concepts also, and everything together with Power BI. So it has a lot of concepts there in one platform. And this is, of course, very interesting new technology. A lot of adoption is done. And then, of course, Snowflake and Databricks, they are both very major platforms. A lot of customers have adopted them already, and they are growing a lot in terms of features, but also in complexity. And yeah, so Databricks and Snowflake are still very important technologies. And what's very interesting at the moment, of course, is the partnership of SAP together with Databricks, so BDC, Business Data Cloud, because SAP, SAP is used by maybe all firms around Germany, and it's definitely the leader in ERP systems. The most valuable data is inside of SAP. And for a lot of companies, you don't come around SAP when you go into larger enterprise platforms. And now with BDC, they are trying to also have one all-in-one solution in there. So you have your SAP, and then you have your DataSphere and a Databricks and so on, everything in one business data cloud. And this, of course, is very interesting because you can deliver from your SAP ERP system the data directly into your Databricks. Yeah, and this is, of course, very interesting, and there will be a lot of adoption there. But yeah, it's of course not so easy to learn, because for SAP you can't just try it out yourself, you can't just get into it. Of course, yeah, from education perspective, it's of course a nightmare, I would say. So with SAP, yeah, but this is also something which is just very important for firms. So having integration to SAP systems and all the new possibilities you have there, of course, is also a very relevant topic. And of course, the classics, of course, like AWS Glue and all the native platforms, Google BigQuery, yeah, and Microsoft, also just Azure Databricks and Azure Data Lake and Synapse and things like that. Classical native platforms, I would say this is also, of course, very valuable knowledge.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like the SAP topic is more of a EU topic, but that's just a feeling that this is more.
Yes, you're right. But yeah, for us, as we have most of our customers in the EU, this, of course, is really the case. But SAP is still also, it's really the market leader for ERP systems. So very important data, even though, of course, you have a lot more systems, and it might be not so relevant outside the EU for firms, but it's still the very valuable information there, of course. And for a lot of use cases, you really need it. Yeah, this is also really in the German space. This is something which might not be as relevant when you say, okay, I want to go into consulting. Of course, it's very easy to start with some AWS platform, because you can get some maybe free credits and you can start up, or you maybe with Databricks you also can get a trial and just start learning yourself, and this is always nice. Yeah, but this is really important for the industry, and this is something I really also don't really favor because I think I really like open systems, like everything open, available to everybody and things like that. And SAP tends to be like really siloed and private and not accessible to anyone. But it's like that. If you know those things, then of course you will have it very easy to get a job. That's just the reality.
It sounds like it's has become better because you now can actually access the data. When I started in 2000, and what was that, 2011 something, I also worked 1 year as a SAP developer, and it was super difficult to actually get data out to other systems. It wasn't that simple that you can access data within SAP. So it's cool that they make some changes and that they go with the times.
I wouldn't say that. they just closed the license for accessing the data efficiently because now they want to sell their new data platform software together with Databricks. So just because you can use Databricks natively with SAP doesn't mean you can use your Databricks with SAP. That means you have this bundled Databricks where you don't need to get it out and things like that. But this is something, and also it's not ready yet. So it just came out and it's not completely ready. But this is definitely something where a lot of companies will head to. Yeah, but at least some basic SAP knowledge. I also didn't have it when I started, but if you have the chance at some point to learn a bit of SAP, a bit of the data model and stuff, this is some skill you really will be happy to have when you work, because it's a thing that runs most of the firms in Europe.
That's true. I need to actually check if they have some free trainings or something that people can get started with. Maybe there's something to send my students to as
well. Just maybe the data model, just to know how things work a bit. Of course, it's far too complex to understand, but if you have some impression like how it's conceptually, if you can get your hands on some also just minor knowledge how things work, it will make your life much easier. Of course, yeah, because this is something a lot of customers are getting SAP data and from the systems, and usually raw still. And when you have like raw SAP data, everything is like really SAP-ish. And even though if you're in Databricks and you have your SAP data, you still need to understand SAP a little bit just to get to work with your data. And this is really a skill not so many people have. So this is really valuable.
Cool. One thing I've been thinking about the past few days, I've been working with, or I've been looking into tools. And one of them, just a side note, was Firebolt, a query engine for OLAP stores. The one topic there is being able to host it yourself, to not just be on the cloud. How do you see this? Because there are use cases like healthcare or some financial stuff where you cannot use the normal cloud, the public cloud. Like, how is that? Do you have clients like that? How do you see this?
Yeah, of course. So definitely there are clients, but usually this is not. So usually it's not like really legally forbidden for them because it's just because there are whole banks that have all the infrastructure in the cloud. So usually it more or less comes down to their own decision. It's not really because they say, okay, for us it's too risky, and for others they say, no, I'm fine with it, because maybe also, of course, it depends on whether the firms have enough knowledge to make sure that they really use it in a secure way. So a lot of firms, they can actually use the public cloud, but they just say, no, it's too risky for us because we don't trust ourselves that we can really responsibly handle it on the cloud. So better we host it ourselves, and we are really sure. And yeah, you really see it that especially new banks, for example, they have a totally different mindset than older banks, for example, right? But yeah, we also have like for example, I have a client in the energy sector who's really, really extremely far more audited than banks, for example, because they are really working on grid data where terrorists bombs or so on. If they could get their hands on that, they exactly would know where to put a bomb, and then everything would, and you would have a blackout and things like that. So it's really sensitive.
Critical.
It's really sensitive data where you really don't want it to be somewhere. So they have very strict audits, and it's very hard for them to actually have the cloud because they need to audit it as any other data center, and every service needs to be audited, and that's usually too much. Also, we have a lot of, because of the US tariffs, we have a lot of customers. They wanted to move into the cloud, but they now postponed the project, or they say, okay, let's reevaluate. Maybe we have other options. There are also more private cloud providers. We have it with Stackit, for example, in Germany. New cloud providers emerging that are really European. And a lot of customers, they say, for us, we try to be more independent from the US because we don't know when there will be new tariffs and the EU needs to react on it, and maybe we will have to pay a lot, or maybe they will shut systems down strategically or something like that. So there are a lot of thoughts now about digital sovereignty. And so more and more customers are looking for alternatives. Doesn't really mean that a lot of people then actually do it because it's very difficult and extremely expensive. If you try to run a Spark cluster, and you can do it, it's open source, you can do it. We also do it for customers. We can manage it for you. If you want to run it on your own, let's say Kubernetes in your own private data center, it's very much work to set it up, to get it running, to operate it, and you need really a lot of expert knowledge. And if you're doing it via an external vendor, you're really dependent on that vendor. You're not dependent anymore on the US, but you're dependent on your local vendor. It might be a good thing, but it might also be a problem. And there's not really the alternative currently to the big hyperscalers. But still we have a big, and that's the good thing about US software. A lot of software is based on open source, and we can use this open source and just build the same platforms on premise as we would use in the cloud. And this is what I also said about conceptual work. In the end, we can also build like a lakehouse on Spark, and with Spark and S3, we would use MinIO for that. In that case, for example, and then we can realize a lakehouse as it is in the cloud, even as scalable based on Kubernetes. The problem is it's extremely hard to build because you need to build it for every customer, and every hardware is also different. You will have a lot of discussions with the data center providers because you need some special way of like handling disks and things like that, and it's just a lot of work, a lot of cost, and that's why most companies come down to, if they really don't have any other choice than doing it, they will do it, otherwise they won't. And of course there are a lot of still platforms like that work on really old patterns, like large relational databases as a data warehouse and things like that. But those are mainly those who stay on premise. Building a modern data platform on premise, that's something only really large corporations can afford. And some of them even move out and move again to the cloud because it's just extremely expensive.
That makes sense. The AWS, Azure, GCP, Snowflake, Databricks, they are good. They know really what they have. They built this really well.
They definitely, and you can build very good platforms with it. But of course, they come at a cost. It's definitely just a cost, and this means that of course a lot of your revenue, so a larger portion of your revenue, goes to those firms, and everybody's using it. And of course, also from my side as a European, I find it a bit sad that a lot of revenues is going into the US, and they have a kind of a monopoly, right, on those things, but they just do it really well, and we profit also a lot from it. That's definitely the case, but they come at a really high price. And but things are changing. We have a lot of funding actually also from the EU. We have a lot of startups that also try to build alternatives. We have the AWS sovereign cloud, which will launch in Brandenburg. So which will be a completely own cloud. Of course, it will be still AWS, but at least it's like European specific. So there's really a trend there that Europeans, they think more about like how to be less dependent on the US. What do they really need to host on hyperscalers? Let's say they have some SAP systems and some virtual machines. Do they really need to host it on AWS, or can they just host it on some Jonas or Telecom data center? Because yes, but for data and analytics, we just don't have the services yet. But I think there will be alternatives soon, and I'm happy if we have European alternatives, because more competition is always better, right, for the consumers and for the ecosystem. I hope we will get less of the monopolies, and I really hope. And this is something also which comes from the technology focus. Like a lot of companies, they buy Databricks and they say, okay, everything must be now built on Databricks. But Databricks, they use a data lake, and a data lake is not inside of Databricks. It's not part of the Databricks itself. Databricks is just the compute and the governance and so on around it. But if you use Azure Databricks, you still use the Azure Data Lake. And with the Azure Data Lake, you can use also other tools. And Delta and Iceberg, they are both formats that are open source, and a lot of tools can read it. So why can't I use Databricks and other tools together on the same data lake and have my governance on a different level? Because why do I need to enforce the use of one specific tool across everything? I'm really not. I really like that. I like the establishment of the data platform teams and such, that you really get some good data governance and so on. But the problem is, if they really enforce a lot of opinionated technology patterns, so that everybody then has to use this Databricks, because then you have this one large cloud data platform everybody uses, and all problems are solved because everyone's using the same thing. But it's not like that. This is not reality. And I see, and nowadays, I don't really see the reason especially for larger firms, to not go hybrid and multi-cloud, not go different tools. You can read with a Databricks on Azure, you can read a AWS S3 data lake, write it to some other data lake on data storage on Google Cloud, and then use BigQuery for some things. You can really, so the tools are open, the data is open. Of course, you have some transfer costs between the costs and regions and things like that, and you need to keep it in mind. And of course, I don't want to neglect that introducing a lot of tools means also a lot of more management and skill up and things like that. This is all true. But I think a lot of companies, they are always trying to find this, okay, I need to do everything with Snowflake because then all my problems will be solved. And then they find at some point, no, I need Databricks, because with Databricks, when I migrate everything to Databricks, then everything will be solved and things like that. And this is like always, and this is like some of the technology mindset, and not just what do I need to do with my data, and then I choose the tools that are just good for it. And don't thinking in closed ecosystems, because the ecosystems are open. We are using open standards. Everybody can read Parquet. Everybody can write and read Parquet. Why do I always need to handle everything as if it's in a database where I have really hard time to get it out? Because if it's in a database, I need to do it inside of the database, right?
True. Yeah, that's the thing. People are always looking for the one tool instead of using the right tool for the job.
Exactly, and they're consumption based, right? So you use it a bit and you pay a bit. So you don't buy a big license, you have to use it. This is like but of course in procurement, they are used to have they buy one tool license for the next 10 years, and then everybody needs to use it because we have bought it and we need to use it, otherwise it's not efficient. I think this is a really old mindset. We have we have so many services. Yeah.
True. We're coming up on the hour. Tom, that was very interesting. Also to see this from another angle, not just from the angle of where people love the angle of a startup and of big tech, but to have this from the angle of we're a consulting company and we're helping all kinds of companies solve their problems. Thank you very much for this insight.
Yeah. Thank you very much. It was fun.
Yeah. All the best. Thanks again.
Thank you.
I'm going to put in the description the link to MSG and also the link to your LinkedIn profile, so people can get in touch with you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
See what you're posting about.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And see you.
It was a pleasure to be here. See you.
Yeah. Bye.